Don't forget, in case you missed it, the new podcast was uploaded, I do believe, there you go, it happened in the end, on Friday, and it's all singing, all dancing, and is rather fabulous. And that's the Confessions podcast, which you can get from wherever you normally get your podcasts. Today's confession, first of the week, comes from Tracy. Thank you very much indeed, Tracy, for this. Father Simon, I'll take you back to the early 70s when I was a young teenager at secondary school. I wasn't progressing well, but I didn't hate school. It was just the lessons that was my problem. Anyway, I had a best friend in those days, Patricia, and she and I had hours of amusement there. And that is when we actually made the effort to attend, instead of bunking off around the local towns and going to Wimpy's, loitering in parks, or pulling faces in every photo booth within a 10-mile radius. So you get the idea of the kind of person Tracy was. Like many pupils, we had created our own names for our teachers. Our maths teacher, Mrs. Pond, we named Lily, obviously. Our chemistry teacher, Mr. Frost, we obviously called Jack. And there was also Dr. Allison. We just called him the Doc and quietly asked him what was up every time we walked past. He found it hilarious.
Yeah.
The school we attended had previously been two separate grammar schools, one each for boys and girls. The head teacher, Mr. Blood, still flounced around in the very officious long black cape that had given him that extra air of importance that was needed for the headship of the posh private school he'd formerly overseen. There was no more fitting name for him than, obviously, Count Dracula, and the Count strode up and down the corridors waiting to pounce on his victims. Anyway, my best friend and I were on report, which meant that we had to have our report cards initialed by the teacher for each lesson to verify that we'd actually turned up. On this particular day, my friend and I arrived quite early for our maths lesson, unusual for us, but it meant that we had time to mess around for a while before the other pupils and Lily arrived. That's Lily, the teacher, obviously. After we'd etched our names with our compasses on the lids of the wooden desks we sat at, I decided to... By the way, lots of bad things in this confession. Don't do any of these. No. I decided to write on a large piece of paper about the undying love my friend had for the boy who always sat at the desk in front of us. Seeing this, Patricia snatched the paper from me and threw it, crumpled up, into her own desk. Deciding this was not sufficient to clear all evidence that she might have any feelings at all for this boy, she fished around in her satchel and pulled out her cigarette lighter that was hidden at the bottom with a packet of 10 No. 6 that she was saving for break time. Different times. And set fire to the incriminating piece of paper. As the paper rose into the air, whirling around like a newly lit Catherine wheel, the other pupils who had all started to enter the room suddenly fell silent. We looked up and saw Lily walking up the corridor towards the classroom, our teacher, remember. Somehow we managed to waft and blow until we extinguished the fire inside the desk and closed the lid tight. What could go wrong? Patricia managed to grab her bag and make a leap to the other side of the room to a different desk, but I was not quick enough, and Lily had entered the room. I flung myself on the floor and crawled to the back of the class and into the store cupboard.
What?
Of course.
Lily proceeded to take the register, the lesson began, and I stayed as quiet as a mouse in the storeroom. I stayed there for half an hour and then crept out and went back to my seat. The lesson progressed until one of the pupils, who was sitting in close proximity to the desks Patricia and I had sat at earlier, suddenly let out a squeal and yelled something like, "Fire!" We turned around to see a long spiral of smoke emerging from the inkwell of said desk. Lily ran to the desk, threw open the lid, and saw the smouldering, crumpled paper inside. Fortunately for us all, she quickly disposed of it and no harm was done. Unfortunately, there were no legible words left amongst the ashes. Along with all the other pupils, Patricia and I could not understand how this had happened. How did the desk set on fire? And we all shook our heads in disbelief, shouting things about maybe it was the sun through the window and the glass from the ink bottle, maybe setting the paper alight. However, Lily wasn't being fooled and took the only course of action she could. She held us to ransom until the guilty party confessed, or everyone would get a detention. Matt's going to like all this. Patricia and I knew, of course, that we had to do the right thing. We knew we couldn't let our fellow pupils suffer a detention with Count Dracula at the helm. Father Simon and the Collective, I'm afraid. This is where we need to ask for forgiveness. We knew this, but we also knew that as Patricia and I were already on report, plus we'd been suspended from the school only the previous month for breaking another stupid rule about smoking in the toilets, we felt we could not risk what punishment might be dealt us if we confessed to this particular crime. I'm also truly sorry that 28 other pupils in Lily Pond's maths class in 1974 had to stay behind and endure the quips and snarls the Count spouted throughout that very long hour. Moreover, I now know that what we did was extremely dangerous and reckless.
Has that been added on?
Yeah. No, that's there. I'm quite sure some of the other pupils knew who had committed the crime, but for some reason they chose not to grass us up. We did act very selfishly. We were concerned about what heinous punishment Count Dracula would conjure up this time. Yes, we were cowards, but, Holly, it was our parents that we didn't want to let down. Well, Patricia's lovely parents, mine didn't give a hoot. I would like to apologise to all the other pupils that were in classes Patricia and I were in during 73 and 74 at that school for the disruptions we caused. Also, and I'm not looking for points here, Holly, I never actually smoked. I was just pretending. I asked for forgiveness too for the stress we must have caused our teachers. I later became a teacher and have had to deal with many challenging situations, but none that has involved fire, smoke or inkwells come to that. In fact, there are very few teacher situations that involve inkwells these days. Yeah. These, of course, Holly, were wells where ink were placed, where you put your quill and wrote from there. Anyway, a fabulous bit of a slice of life from a 1974 secondary modern school. Sister Holly.
It's pretty shocking, isn't it, really? The bunking off school, the smoking. She says she didn't properly smoke. I'm still not impressed with it, really. You were just trying to look cool in front of your friends, and it just wasn't very cool, was it? And frankly, I think you deserved the punishment because you were the one who set that dangerous piece of paper alight, and it was very, very dangerous, and people could have gotten hurt. And so it was very grateful that Lily came along and saved the day. It really wasn't good, and those poor those classmates who then got punished because of you and your dreadful ways. And so that's why I'm not forgiving at all.
I mean, she's off on one there.
Yeah.
Brother from another gutter.
Patricia and Tracy strike me as somewhat intimidating, don't they, with Embassy number 6 and setting fire to their desks. But it was just one piece of paper, wasn't it? It was hardly towering inferno.
They were smoking in the toilets the month
they
before.
were doing a bit of that as well. But in a way, didn't we all learn a lesson? And everyone learned a lesson there, which is don't set fire to your desk.
And don't
they
smoke.
didn't do it again.
No.
So for that reason, and also she's now, poacher turned gamekeeper. She's now a teacher herself. So everyone's learning lessons.
Is that right?
All the time. It's like the circle of life. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
61054 on the text, please. First word is Simon. Do you forgive Tracy, yes or no? 61054. And just before the news, we heard from Tracy and her best friend Patricia. Secondary Modern School, 1974. They were both on report. However, they still caused a fire in a desk by setting fire to a love note. The teacher found, so the whole desk goes on fire and the whole class is kept in because no one owns up. The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Sam says, not forgiven. Tracy and Patricia sound like a right pair. As a teacher myself, I can't even begin to imagine how the teachers dealt with such bad behaviour. Johnny says, forgiven, but please tell Matt it was Players number 6 or Embassy number 10, not Embassy number 6.
Oh,
I
come
remember
on, Matt.
my cigarettes from back in the day. And finally, Jess in Worthing says, forgiven. Reminds me of my mum who passed snuff around her classroom, causing her teacher to cancel the class, thinking there was some sort of epidemic.
Pass round snuff? What kind of a school is it? That's got to be like an elite boarding school, isn't it?
I thought so, yeah. It's a bit way back as well.
Yeah, maybe. Is that like a Dickensian story?
Yes.
Anyway, I've never had a confession involving snuff.
No.
I've also never had a confession from a spy before. Anyway, that will be included in this week's collection. So if you have a confession for us, we would love to know all about it. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. I didn't mean at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, today's confession comes from the Commander. That's all we can say. Father Simon, forgiving Brother Matt and unforgiving Sister Holly. My confession occurs in the time just before the first Gulf War, and the Iron Curtain still existed, and way before Holly was born. So we're kind of late 80s, I think.
Yeah.
That's where we are. I worked for a company that the Commander is very opaque at a number of points in this
Deliberately,
confession. Yes. I worked for a company, let's just say, specialising in communications, and he's put that in inverted commas.
Right.
There was going to be an exhibition in Baghdad for local manufacturers.
Okay.
I feel very unsettled. To put it into context, this was at the time of the Iraqi supergun and Matrix Churchill affairs. Worth Googling, Holly,
Okay.
for details, says the Commander. The Iraqi president was a fan of superguns, which were space guns that could launch objects into space. And Matrix Churchill was an engineering company that were acquired by Iraqi interests. All very Slough House, but that's. Do you feel as though you're up to speed and fully briefed?
I think so, yeah. I think I'm there.
I was asked by a government department who reside in a donut, so that means it's GCHQ, to look out for certain devices on the Eastern Bloc country stands at this fair in Baghdad. Lots of them were attending this exhibition in Baghdad, and they asked me to collect any relevant information for Queen and Country.
Oh.
I have to tell you, Father Simon, I was in my early 20s and still naive in the matters of personal safety, so I said yes. So walking around the said exhibition, I came across a Bulgarian stand with some devices of interest. Again, I have no further detail. What on earth can these devices of interest be? I was accosted by a very polite, large lady dressed in a brown trouser suit. Again, to put this into perspective, at the time I was 9.5 stone, which is 65 kilograms.
Okay, right. So a slight chap then.
The lady in my eyes was clearly a former Olympic shot put champion, as she was at least twice my size in girth, height and weight. She welcomed me onto her stand, giving me a Bulgarian bear hug and kissed me on both cheeks. Clearly she had not had much interest from the local punters, as she proceeded to show me every product on her stand. After 30 minutes I managed to extricate myself from her grasp, and she promised to give me some documentation the following day.
Literally could be documents, but anyway. Yeah.
Anyway, the next day, Hilda, the shot put lady, arrived on our exhibition stand, much to the mirth of my colleagues, as she was now wearing a very short red miniskirt with a loosely unbuttoned blouse, bright red lipstick, and she came bearing gifts. She put down her gifts so that she could give me a bear hug and planted red lipstick all over my cheeks. My colleagues were laughing uncontrollably, the bounders. I changed that bit.
Yeah.
She presented her gifts, lots of GCHQ donut interesting documentation.
Okay.
A bottle of Bulgarian champagne.
Sounds lovely.
And 5 LPs of Bulgarian love songs.
Oh, I love them all.
She eventually departed by giving me a final bear hug with a slug of a kiss on the lips before whispering in my ear to come over and see me later.
Ooh.
Clearly, she thought I was potential double agent material.
Yes.
I was being recruited. They were testing the waters. Father Simon, I have to say, I left the country hastily. I presented the documentation to the donuts at GCHQ and recounted my tribulations. The donuts were very grateful, but laughed considerably. So I handed over the Bulgarian love songs LPs and told them told them where to shove them, to be honest. But I did drink the Bulgarian champagne, which was surprisingly good. So I don't seek forgiveness from the donuts at GCHQ. Probably had to suffer the indignity of listening to all of the LPs in case there was any covert material contained within the songs. I do seek forgiveness from Hilda, the Bulgarian shot put lady, for not having the courage to reciprocate her husky advances. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted to be a double agent. If you read this out, could I have a couple of mugs rather than a smart speaker?
No.
Management has just dropped and broken my favourite mug. So would that be the management of GCHQ?
Could be.
That's very careless
M,
of them.
or the other one.
M has broken the mug.
Yes.
And Q.
And C.
And them.
And other letters.
Anyway, so it's very interesting. Who knows what was being sold, but something very, very dodgy for certain. Sister Holly.
It's so difficult because you were there, you're representing the country, and so I understand, but also I feel slightly sorry for Hilda. I feel like you led her on, she kissed you on the lips. That's actually...
I don't think Hilda needed a lot of leading on.
That's quite forward. I think she was pretty into...
Yeah.
She was pretty into the commander, and I think he could have maybe let her down a bit more gently, and so I feel a little bit sorry for her, and so it's a light not forgiven for that reason.
Not forgiven?
Yeah, because I think he led her on for that half an hour. I think he could have played it a bit cooler, to be honest.
I think she could look after herself.
Yeah, no problem.
By the sound of it.
Definitely.
Brother Matthew?
I think everyone's coming out of this well, because I think Hilda has gone back to her bosses and said, oh yes, I've sent the champagne and the records and all the documents over to the spies in James Bond, and they're doing their stuff with them. So mission accomplished. Well done me. Can I have some more champagne? And also, obviously, the commander did well with a little kiss on the lips, which is always nice. Anyway, so I'm going
not necessarily from
Not from anyone.
maybe. I mean, in a different life, him and Hilda could have been running off to the goat farm together. So who knows who we
Do they have
judge?
goat farms in
They
Bulgaria?
definitely do. Along with the champagne, lovely as it is. So going to forgive.
that reason, you're
For that
going to
reason,
forgive.
yeah.
Okay, so that's very interesting. Well, where do you stand on this? Do you think the commander is entitled to any forgiveness? 61054. First word is Simon. Just before the news, tonight's confession involved GCHQ, the Baghdad Arms Fair, a Bulgarian spy master in a mini dress, Bulgarian champagne, and 5 albums of Bulgarian love songs. You had to be there. The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
Not forgiven, says Jess. I'm with Holly. Poor Hilda sounds like she really got the hots for the commander. Miniskirt and red lipsticks. She was certainly on a mission. George in St Ives says not forgiven. Poor Hilda. He was smoozing her for half an hour. No wonder she thought that he was into her. And finally, Ruth says forgiven. There are definitely goat farms in Bulgaria. Score for Matt.
Oh,
Yes.
that's right. We've definitely found that out.
Yeah,
haven't we?
well, according to Ruth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, if you're a spy or you work for GCHQ, I'm sure you've got a few things you can tell us. It's all above board.
Yeah, fine.
Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.
Bit of judgment on Cecilia there.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just shocked that she's
Oh dear.
morals of a sewer. Anyway, which puts me in mind of today's confession, which comes from Dora the Explorer. Thank you, Dora. Way back in the mid-1960s, my husband and I felt that our 2 daughters, aged 4 and 6 at the time, were ready for their first family holiday abroad. We decided that we would drive to Germany and visit my aunt and uncle who'd been posted there by the Canadian Army. It's a very multinational confession, as you're about to find out. We had a good featuring a language that has never been heard on this show before.
Wow.
We had a good holiday with them, but left earlier than planned in order to fit in a tour around this part of Germany for a day or two on our way back to the ferry port for home in England. We didn't have a great deal of money, so decided to do things on the cheap and look out for a B&B instead of a hotel. I feel that I should point out at this time that as far as foreign languages go, I only spoke a very limited amount of French and even less German. But as I believed that most Europeans had a fair smattering of English, I would be able to cope just fine.
Okay.
After all, we British have a tradition of speaking slowly and in a very loud voice until we have made ourselves understood throughout the world.
Yeah.
Everything would be fine. So off we set on our unplanned adventure. We duly travelled around in a kind of a rather haphazard way, to be honest, never quite sure where we were, until we entered a nice large town where we felt we would like to stop, look around a bit and maybe even stay the night. My husband drove around in the suburbs as we were more likely to find cheaper accommodation there than in the town centre. Soon we spotted a house with a large illuminated sign in the front garden. I didn't understand the writing on the board, which was new to me, but it was obviously a guest house sign, so I knocked on the door. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? The lady who answered spoke neither German nor French, which I thought was rather odd. However, she called for her daughter, a schoolgirl of around 13, who said she was learning French at school and could she be of any help to us. I told her in my bad French that we wanted a room for the night, that our daughters could share with us, and we had sleeping bags for them if needed. Well, the girl spoke with her mother in their unintelligible language for a while, and as I had been joined on the doorstep by my husband and daughters, we were all invited into the house. We waited in the hallway for a few minutes, and then the lady showed us into a large and beautifully furnished ground floor bedroom. We thanked her, we left our luggage, and then the 4 of us went off to explore the town. Having played tourist for a couple of hours, we made our way back to our newfound guest house and settled our girls into bed for the night. We asked, this sounds as though you're chancing your arm here, Dora. We asked the teenage daughter if she'd be kind enough to babysit for our girls so that my husband and I could go out for an evening meal. She readily agreed, so off we went, found a pleasant restaurant and enjoyed a tasty meal plus a drink or two. Then back to the house, quickly into our large and comfortable bed and fast asleep in seconds. Beautiful. Well, the next morning, the landlady showed us into the dining room where we had a traditional and very substantial breakfast. A little later, the schoolgirl came into the room and I told her that we'd very much enjoyed our stay and that we were ready to leave and ask for the bill. She looked a little confused, but spoke to her mother, who then picked up the telephone and began a long, garbled call in that language, which I'd never heard before. Puzzled, I asked the girl if there was a problem. No, she replied, my mother is asking a friend how much she should charge you, because this isn't a guest house.
Oh, no.
But you have a large advertising sign outside, I said. Yes, it says Bitsmaschen Reparator High, which is Luxembourgish for sewing machines repaired here. I confused a sewing machine for a house. In Luxembourg, their sewing machines look like houses. With a very red face, I apologised profusely, swallowed hard, and paid the bill. Remember, Bitsmaschen Reparator High, Luxembourgish for sewing machines are mended here. Who knows when you're going to need that? I feel that any further apology to the very accommodating Luxembourg family is unnecessary, as everything ended happily with much laughter and many hugs before we left. However, having finally made my confession, I now apologise to my daughters, who for so many years have been under the false impression that their mother was fluent in both French and German and a little bit of Luxembourgish, and could quite happily talk her way around Europe without stitching up anyone. So very sorry, girls, for misleading you for so long. P.S. Apologies to the Luxembourgers for not knowing that we'd actually strayed into their country in the first place. So Dora the Explorer wanting some forgiveness. I'm not sure whether she deserves it, really. I mean, how can you not know that you're in Luxembourg? That you've actually left Germany and France and you're in a different country. Anyway, I mean, that could have ended up disastrously, but fortunately the Luxembourgers are clearly very hospitable.
Yes.
And welcomed the family in. Why didn't they just say no?
Yeah, I thought that was surprising.
Anyway, that's what I'd have said.
Well, no forgiveness here, and for two reasons. One, how did you not know that you were in Luxembourg? That I find that surprising. Yes. And also the fact that you went on holiday and you didn't think maybe to learn a bit more of the language just to get by. I think it was a bit disappointing that you didn't know very much. And so that's why I'm not forgiving at all.
Very judgmental, as ever. Matthew, what do you say to Dora?
So I'm going to forget. I mean, the first thing to say is Luxembourg very small. So you could drive into it, drive out of it, and hardly notice it. At one end of the street to the other.
There might be a sign that says you are now entering
maybe, and then maybe not looking at the sign. Also, who puts a neon sign in their garden saying "I repair sewing machines"? It feels a bit of overkill there,
Luxembourg
really.
in the 60s.
I mean, you just
it was the home of broken sewing machines.
Clearly, loads of sewing machines in Luxembourg. Highly unreliable. Needed to put a neon sign.
People travelled for
neon
miles.
Sign in the garden. I don't think that's necessary. Also, if she wasn't prepared to put people up in the room, shouldn't have let them in the house. So really, isn't it their fault in a way? But then we all learnt a lesson, didn't we? So to do with sewing machines and their reliability in Luxembourg. So therefore, I'm going to forgive.
People's verdict, please, for Dora the Explorer. Do you forgive? Yes or no? 61054. First word is Simon.
Oh, yeah.
Right there on Greatest Hits Radio Premium. Just before the news, we had a confession from Dora the Explorer about a family holiday that they were taking around France and Germany. They're looking for a B&B, bed and breakfast. Saw a neon sign. It was clearly advertising a guest house, except that it wasn't. It was advertising a sewing machine repair shop, but they confused the two, and they ended up making friends with some Luxembourgers. Anyway, so people's verdict is in. Here we go.
So Gemma in Worthing says, forgiven. Ultimately, everyone won here. The lady who owned the house got some extra money from some tourists, and Dora and her family had a nice time as well. Mary in Stirlingshire says, forgiven. I was once staying in France near the Swiss border, and on a day's picnic outing, took a wrong turn down a country lane and ended up in Switzerland. Easily done. And finally, April in Morpeth says, not forgiven, but I've just got my sewing machine out for the first time in 2 years, and it's not working. I wonder if they do call-outs.
Yeah, back in the 60s, you had to go to Luxembourg to get them repaired.
The neon house.
That's the one, the neon house, that's right. Your confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's confession time. Just a useful reminder, which I think a handy cut out and keep guide to the fact that you can get your Confessions podcast every Friday. It's new and it's fresh. So there is a brand new one being prepared even as we speak, which will be there for you to pick up from the podcast shop tomorrow sometime. Always worth checking in a couple of times. Maxine sends in tonight's confession. Thank you, Maxine. Good evening, Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Holly, No Forgiveness, and the Forgiving Collective. Your reputation is a strong one. My confession goes back to the early 90s, when people carriers were quite new on the road. I worked for a building society in central London. I'm hoping that I've taken out all the stuff. I just should have checked this.
Oh, no.
I worked for a building society in central London, and an old customer from a previous office offered to take me out for dinner, as I had helped him a lot with mortgage information for his new business as a financial advisor. Hopefully this is where Matt decides to forgive me straight away.
Why would that be? Because of mortgage advisors?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Because you love them.
That's my soft spot. Right, okay.
Anyway, Clive, please change his name.
Definitely should have checked this beforehand.
Let's stick with Clive.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
it's too late now.
Fine.
Anyway,
yeah.
Clive picked me up from work and we drove to Covent Garden, where he parked the car on Longacre. I did mention that it was before 6 p.m. and he should probably get a ticket, but he said it's going to be fine.
Oh, right.
It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So we enjoyed a lovely, purely platonic dinner at the same restaurant used in the film 4 Weddings and a Funeral, where Hugh Grant and Andy McDowell discussed previous romantic partners. But anyway, I digress. Clive, not his real name, and I chatted about all sorts of things. We had a lot in common, as we both loved travelling. He was just telling me about when he worked for a certain city council, and a friend in the parking department used to lose any parking tickets that he got, and in fact still did so. It was just at this point, and just as I was about to start on my main course of salmon, which was delicious, by the way, it's like a Ronnie Corbett diversion.
It is, isn't it?
That I saw his car being towed away.
Oh!
He had his back to the window, so he didn't see anything. My initial thought was, your mate won't be able to help you out with this one, pal. Needless to say, I didn't tell him, and I carried on with my dinner. I kept it to myself for a number of reasons. One, I thought he'll probably get quite angry about his car being towed away, and that would be a bit embarrassing, as I didn't know him very well at this point. Secondly, he couldn't do anything about the car at that stage because it was already towed. 3, it would have spoilt the whole evening. And 4, more importantly, I might have had to pay for the meal.
That's true. Yeah.
When we left the restaurant, he offered me a lift home, not realising that his car wasn't there anymore. But I made an excuse about my train being due and that my boyfriend would probably be on it. So I ran like mad down the Strand to Charing Cross Station, and Clive, not his real name, walked away in the moonlight to Longacre and to his car, or so he thought. Under normal circumstances, I would have been in his car like a shot rather than getting a late night train. Who wants to do that? Not me. But anyway, I couldn't get a lift because the car didn't exist anymore. Anyway, to his horror, the car wasn't there, and so he went to Bow Street Police Station to report the fact that it had been stolen. At which point the police officer apparently said, "No, Mr. Jacobs, it hasn't been stolen. It's been taken to the Pound at Vauxhall." So Clive Jacobs,
yes, who we've just named, yep,
had to get a taxi there to retrieve his car, paying a huge parking fine and pay for the car to be released, as well as having paid for dinner. So all in all, a very expensive night for him. He called me the next day to tell me all about it, and I acted very shocked.
Yeah.
In fact, my colleagues thought I should get an equity card for my stellar acting performance. I have toyed with sending this confession for many years, so now is the time to seek your forgiveness. So, Clive Jacobs, sorry about your car being towed and not telling you about it, even if I did see it happen, and it would have helped you a lot if you'd actually paid for it in the first place. Maybe next time get a ticket for your parking like everybody else. So much easier than going to the compound and paying hundreds of pounds, just saying. A rules-based society is there for a reason, Clive. The Sex Pistols might have wanted anarchy in the UK, but the rest of us, not so much. Just think about that.
Yeah, Clive.
By the way, we remained friends for a number of years and had many more successful nights out after that, but I never told him about his car. We lost touch in the 90s and he moved to Holland. So I do hope, for my sake, that he still lives there and never hears this confession, because he'll know it was me. Well, he absolutely will know it's you. I mean, it's not
Yes.
going to be very difficult
Yes.
to try and remember who actually was there when his car was towed away. But Maxine saw it and didn't say anything because she was afraid she was going to have to pay for it herself. Well, we all know people like Maxine, but here's Sister Holly, she's always forgiving. Not.
Yes, well, Maxine, you weren't a very good friend that evening.
Not at all.
You sat there whilst seeing his car being towed away. I mean, I'm surprised that you acted so calmly whilst seeing the car being towed away. It would have been written all over my face if that
Everyone
had been
would
me.
say, your car's going.
Look, oh my gosh, your car. Yes, but she didn't do that, and that's really disappointing because it was a very selfish reason because she didn't want to pay the bill.
Yes.
And I don't think that's very good and not very admirable, and that's why I'm not forgiving at all.
Brother from another country.
Yeah, I'd have done exactly the same. Exactly the same.
You'd just let the car get towed
just
away.
let it go. I mean, it's gone. The car's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. Also, it's going to ruin the night. She's absolutely right. Would ruin the night. Also, she might have ended up having to pay the bill. That's a supplementary. But it's, nothing you can do.
It
The
did
car's
ruin
gone.
the night for
It's
Clive.
gone. It's different, obviously. Well, Clive needs to start obeying the rules like everyone else, Clive, when you're not arranging all of your mortgages. Yeah, looks like the rules do apply to the mortgages as well, doesn't it? Sunshine.
Swanning in here with your paperwork.
Swanning off to Eindhoven or wherever it was you ended up. So for that reason, with all your mortgages, I'm gonna forgive.
So it was an anti-mortgage.
It was an anti-mortgage rat.
You don't need a new mortgage, do you? by
No,
any chance?
not just yet.
Okay, it's the people's verdict, please. 61054. Do you forgive Maxine, yes or no? First word on the text has to be Simon. 61054. First word is Simon for the people's verdict. However, tonight, just before the news, a confession from Maxine, who watched her as her friend's car was towed away and she said nothing because, amongst other reasons, she would have to pay the bill for the food. Anyway, parking department... She had to go to the lockup. He had to go to the lockup. Anyway, he then moved to Holland, and it was all Maxine's fault.
Yeah.
Anyway, people's verdict. Here it is.
So Gemma from Western Supermare says, forgiven. At the end of the day, he should have paid for his parking. But Jess in St Ives says, not forgiven. Why didn't Maxine mention that the car was being towed? I would have immediately mentioned something like that. It'd be written all over my face, as I'm a dreadful liar. But Sue in Liverpool says, easy to forgive this one. He got his mates to let him off parking tickets before. Well, not this time, Sunshine. Have to agree with Matt on this one.
Is that
So
right?
cheeky to think he thought he'd get away with it.
That's the way you get your verdict read out.
Yeah.
Just agree with Matt.
Yeah,
it seems
correct.
to be a very straightforward, if slightly corrupt system. So your confession, please, for next week. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Brand new podcast with you tomorrow.